In a quiet southern town where nothing ever happens, a teenage girl is found dead by the river. No signs of struggle, no clear motive, just silence. But beneath that silence, a forbidden affair with the town's sheriff, and the real killer wasn't who anyone expected. This isn't just a murder story, it's a chilling tale of betrayal, of honor, and of the secrets people are willing to kill to protect. In the quiet town of Christridge, Georgia, the sheriff was more than just a figure of authority. He was a symbol of stability, someone the townspeople trusted without question. Sheriff Matthew Holbrook, a 38-year-old lawman, was known for his calm demeanor and sense of duty, a husband and father who had protected his town for years. But the discovery of a young woman's body on the riverbank shattered the town's peace. It wasn't the kind of crime Christridge was used to. There were no signs of a struggle, no obvious motive for the death. The woman was identified as Aisha Khan, a 19-year-old Muslim from a local immigrant family. Her death was unexpected, but what followed was even more shocking. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear this was not just an accidental death or a simple crime of passion. Hidden behind the sheriff's badge was a secret no one had seen coming. A secret affair between Matthew Holbrook and Ayesha Khan. Their illicit relationship, concealed from the world, set in motion a chain of events that led to betrayal, lies, and ultimately murder. Christridge was a town that prided itself on its quiet. It was a place where the biggest scandal was a dispute over a broken fence or a teenager caught speeding down Main Street. Most of the residents had lived there for generations, and newcomers were rare. Everyone knew each other, and there was a sense of security in the predictable routines of small town life. It was a town that didn't expect change, and certainly didn't expect tragedy. At the heart of this peaceful town was Sheriff Matthew Holbrook. At 38, Matthew was a respected figure, not only because of his title, but because of his personal dedication to his role. He had served the community as sheriff for 5 years and had been a deputy for nearly a decade before that. His life seemed picture perfect. He had a loving wife, Susan, and 2 young children. On the outside, the Holbrook family represented the ideal Southern family, complete with Sunday church services and backyard barbecues. But beneath the surface, Matthew's life was far from perfect. His marriage to Susan had grown cold over the years. What had once been a passionate relationship had become a monotonous routine. Susan was a devoted wife and mother, but she had become more focused on her children and her role in the community than on her marriage. Matthew had also grown distant, throwing himself into his work and avoiding the emotional void that had developed between them. Aisha Khan, on the other hand, was a striking contrast to the residents of Christridge. Just 19 years old, she was the daughter of Muslim immigrants who had moved to Christridge a decade earlier. The Khan family owned a small grocery store in town, and while they were respected by most residents, they remained somewhat isolated. Aisha's parents were conservative, holding fast to their cultural and religious values, but Ayesha was different. She had grown up caught between 2 worlds, her parents' traditional expectations and her own desire for freedom and independence. Aisha was bright, ambitious, and restless. She dreamed of leaving Christridge, going to college, and experiencing the world beyond the confines of her small town. But for now, she was stuck in Christridge, working in her family's store and living under the watchful eye of her parents. It was a chance meeting that brought Aisha and Matthew together. One day, there had been a small theft at the Khan family's shop. Matthew was called in to investigate, and it was during this routine visit that he first met Ayesha. She was polite and respectful, but there was something about her that caught Matthew's attention. An intensity in her eyes, a sharpness in her words. She wasn't like the other young women in Christridge, and that intrigued him. In the weeks following their first meeting, Matthew found reasons to stop by the Khan family store more often. What began as casual conversation between the sheriff and a young woman soon developed into something more. Aisha would ask Matthew about his work, his life in law enforcement, and the stories of the town. Matthew, in turn, was drawn to her curiosity, her intelligence, and the way she seemed to be searching for something beyond the life she knew. Their interactions were subtle at first. Harmless questions about the law, light-hearted banter about small town gossip, but with each passing conversation, an unspoken tension began to build between them. Ayesha's fascination with Matthew grew, not just because of his position as sheriff, but because he represented a world so different from the one she had grown up in. For Matthew, the attraction was undeniable. Aisha's youth and vitality were intoxicating. She made him feel alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. At home, his marriage to Susan had become more of a partnership than a romance. It was a chance meeting that brought Aisha and Matthew together. One day, there had been a small theft at the Khan family's shop. Matthew was called in to investigate, and it was during this routine visit that he first met Aisha. She was polite and respectful, but there was something about her that caught Matthew's attention. An intensity in her eyes, a sharpness in her words. She wasn't like the other young women in Crestridge, and that intrigued him. In the weeks following their first meeting, Matthew found reasons to stop by the Khan family store more often. What began as casual conversation between the sheriff and a young woman soon developed into something more. Aisha would ask Matthew about his work, his life in law enforcement, and the stories of the town. Matthew, in turn, was drawn to her curiosity, her intelligence, and the way she seemed to be searching for something beyond the life she knew. Their interactions were subtle at first. Harmless questions about the law, light-hearted banter about small town gossip, but with each passing conversation, an unspoken tension began to build between them. Ayesha's fascination with Matthew grew, not just because of his position as sheriff, but because he represented a world so different from the one she had grown up in. For Matthew, the attraction was undeniable. Aisha's youth and vitality were intoxicating. She made him feel alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. At home, his marriage to Susan had become more of a partnership than a romance. Their first kiss was tentative, but it was enough to break the dam that had been holding back their emotions. From that night on, their relationship changed. They began meeting in secret, sneaking off to neighboring towns where no one knew them, exchanging texts late into the night. Eventually, their physical relationship deepened. The affair was everything Matthew had been missing in his life: excitement, passion, and a sense of being wanted. But as exciting as it was also dangerous. Matthew was a public figure, and Aisha was the daughter of a devout Muslim family. If anyone found out, the consequences would be disastrous. They both knew the risks, but the pull of their attraction was too strong to resist. As weeks turned into months, Matthew and Aisha's affair intensified, but with the passion came the weight of secrecy, and for Aisha, the burden became unbearable. She had always felt torn between her family's expectations and her desire for independence, but now she was caught in a web of lies that threatened to unravel her entire life. Aisha's parents had begun to pressure her into marriage. They had already started introducing her to potential suitors within their community, young men from similar backgrounds who would uphold the family's values. Aisha, however, had no interest in marrying someone chosen by her parents. She had dreams of going to college, of seeing the world, but she knew those dreams were slipping away with each passing day. The affair with Matthew had given her a sense of control, a way to rebel against the life her parents had planned for her. But it also made her feel trapped. She knew their relationship couldn't last. Matthew was a married man with a family, and she was too young to be involved in something so complicated. The guilt gnawed at her, and the fear of discovery kept her awake at night. Matthew felt the pressure too. His double life took its toll. At home, Susan had noticed the changes in him. His late nights, his increasing distance, his mood swings. She didn't know the reason for his behavior, but she knew something was wrong. The affair had consumed Matthew's thoughts, and he was finding it harder and harder to keep up the facade of being the perfect husband and sheriff. As Aisha pulled away emotionally, Matthew became more desperate. He didn't want to lose her, but he knew their relationship was on borrowed time. They both knew something had to give, but neither was prepared for what would happen next. It was early one Saturday morning when a local jogger made the grim discovery. A body, half submerged in the shallow waters of the Broadleaf River, lay still and motionless. At first, the jogger thought it might be an animal caught in the river, but as he got closer, the unmistakable shape of a human body became clear. The jogger immediately called 911, and within minutes, the Crestridge Sheriff's Department was on the scene. Sheriff Matthew Holbrook arrived shortly thereafter, his heart pounding in his chest as he approached the body. The sight that greeted him sent a shockwave of terror through him. There, lying in the cold water, was Aisha Khan. Her face was pale, her clothes soaked, and there were no immediate signs of trauma. To anyone else, it might have looked like an accidental drowning, but Matthew knew better. The fear that had been building inside him for weeks now turned into full-blown panic. He couldn't let anyone know about their relationship. Not now, not ever. The local coroner, Dr. Harold Banks, arrived on the scene and conducted a preliminary examination. There were no obvious signs of violence, but something about the scene didn't sit right with him. Aisha's body was too still, too peaceful, as if she had been placed in the water rather than fallen in accidentally. Dr. Banks ordered an autopsy, and the body was taken to the county morgue. Meanwhile, Matthew did his best to keep his composure. He released a statement to the press, expressing his condolences to the Khan family and promising a full investigation into Aisha's death. But inside, he was crumbling. He knew that if anyone dug too deeply into her life, they would find the connection between them. And that would be the end of it. As the investigation into Aisha's death began, Detective Eleanor Marsh from a neighbouring county was called to assist. Marsh was known for her keen investigative skills and her ability to see through deception. From the moment she arrived in Crestridge, she sensed something was wrong. The town, though small and quiet, seemed to be hiding a secret, and Marsh was determined to uncover it. Marsh began by interviewing those closest to Aisha. Her family, devastated by the loss, told Marsh that Aisha had been acting strangely in the weeks leading up to her death. She had become more withdrawn, more secretive, and had avoided her parents' questions about her future. They had assumed it was just the typical behaviour of a young woman dealing with the pressures of adulthood. But now they wondered if there was more to it. Aisha's friends also painted a picture of a struggling young woman. She had confided to some of them that she was seeing someone, but she never revealed his identity. She had hinted that he was older, that their relationship was complicated, and that she didn't know what to do. Her friends had written it off as a fling, something that would pass. But now they were beginning to see the warning signs they had missed. Marsh's instincts told her that Aisha's death was no accident. There were too many unanswered questions, too many loose ends. But without hard evidence, she had little to go on. The autopsy results would take time, and for now, she had only suspicions. As the investigation into Aisha's death continued, Matthew Holbrook's life began to spiral out of control. He was a man accustomed to order, discipline, and control, qualities that had served him well as sheriff. But now, everything he had worked so hard to build was on the verge of collapse. The weight of the affair, the discovery of Ayesha's body, and the ensuing investigation were closing in on him. At home, his wife, Susan, noticed the changes in him more than anyone else. Matthew had always been a private man, but in recent months his distance had become unbearable. He rarely spoke at dinner, often stayed late at the office, or took long drives without explanation. Susan had begun to ask questions, gently at first, but more insistently as time went on. In a moment of desperation, Matthew took matters into his own hands. He went to the evidence room late one night and used his position to access Aisha's personal effects. Her phone had been found near the river, but it had been damaged, and the investigators had not yet been able to recover any data from it. Matthew knew that if they could unlock the phone, her messages would reveal everything. The secret meetings, the affair, and the truth he couldn't let come to light. By all accounts, Ayesha had been a bright and ambitious young woman with dreams of leaving Christridge for college, but something had changed in the months leading up to her death. She had become more withdrawn, her friends said, more secretive, more anxious. Marsh interviewed Aisha's parents, Imran and Fatima Khan, who were devastated by their daughter's death. They described her as a dutiful daughter who had always respected them, but they admitted she had been deeply conflicted about her future. Marsh learned more from Ayesha's best friend, Lila, who revealed that Ayesha had been seeing an older man. She felt trapped, torn between her feelings for this man and her fear of what her family would think if they ever found out. Leela described Ayesha's growing anxiety, her fear that things were moving too fast, and her feeling that she was in over her head. This revelation set off alarm bells for Marsh. Who was this older man? And why had no one come forward about the relationship? The more Marsh dug into Ayesha's past, the closer she got to the truth. In Ayesha's journal, Marsh found an entry that read, "We need to talk. I don't know what to do anymore." The entry was signed with an initial, M. Marsh knew she was on the right track, but the identity of M remained a mystery. She had a feeling this older man wasn't just some random person. He was someone with power, someone who had a vested interest in keeping their relationship a secret. Marsh's next step was to confront Matthew himself. She approached him cautiously, asking routine questions about the investigation and subtly probing for signs of guilt. Matthew, though outwardly calm, couldn't shake the feeling that Marsh was onto him. He denied knowing Ayesha beyond a professional capacity, insisting their interactions were limited to his visits to the store. But Marsh wasn't buying it. The more Matthew tried to distance himself from Ayesha, the more convinced she became that he was hiding something. She began to dig deeper into Matthew's personal life, interviewing his colleagues, his friends, and even his wife, Susan. It was during an interview with one of Matthew's deputies that Marsh uncovered another key piece of evidence. The deputy, who wished to remain anonymous, confided that Matthew had been acting strangely for months, taking unexplained absences and seeming preoccupied. Marsh's suspicions were growing stronger. Matthew was hiding something that connected him to Ayesha's death, but without hard evidence, she knew he would continue to evade justice. Then, a new breakthrough came from an unexpected source. While reviewing Ayesha's financial records, Marsh discovered a hidden bank account in her name, one that had received large, regular deposits over the past several months. She brought Matthew in for questioning, laying out the financial records, surveillance footage from a gas station showing Ayesha with him, and testimony from those who had seen them together. Matthew's facade finally began to crack. At first, he continued to deny everything, insisting the money was unrelated and his meetings with Ayesha were purely professional. But Marsh wouldn't let him off the hook. She pressed harder, pointing to the inconsistencies in his story. Then, a twist emerged. one that neither Marsh nor Matthew had seen coming. Forensic evidence from the autopsy revealed that Ayesha had not drowned. Instead, she had been poisoned. The poison had been administered in small doses over time, causing her death just days before her body was found. The substance used was rare, and further investigation traced it back to the Conn family shop. Marsh was stunned. All this time, she had been focused on Matthew, but now the evidence pointed in a different direction. Aisha's father, Imran Khan, was brought in for questioning. Under intense pressure, he broke down, confessing that he had discovered Aisha's affair with Matthew and saw it as a betrayal of the family's honor. At first, he continued to deny everything, insisting the money was unrelated and his meetings with Ayesha were purely professional. But Marsh wouldn't let him off the hook. She pressed harder, pointing to the inconsistencies in his story. Then, a twist emerged, one that neither Marsh nor Matthew had seen coming. Forensic evidence from the autopsy revealed that Ayesha had not drowned. Instead, she had been poisoned. The poison had been administered in small doses over time, causing her death just days before her body was found. The substance used was rare, and further investigation traced it back to the Conn family shop. Marsh was stunned. All this time, she had been focused on Matthew, but now the evidence pointed in a different direction. Aisha's father, Imran Khan, was brought in for questioning. Under intense pressure, he broke down, confessing that he had discovered Aisha's affair with Matthew and saw it as a betrayal of the family's honor. In a series of chilling confessions, Imran revealed that he had been slowly poisoning Aisha, hoping to rid himself of the shame she had brought upon the family. He had carefully planned her death to look like an accident, but his plan had ultimately failed. News of Imran's arrest sent shockwaves through Christridge. Aisha's death had been the result of a father's misguided sense of honor, not the actions of a corrupt sheriff. Matthew's affair had set the tragedy in motion, but it was Imran who had taken her life. The revelations destroyed Matthew's career and family all the same. Ayesha's death continued to haunt the town long after the case was closed. Her family was shattered by the tragedy, and the community was divided by the revelations of the affair and the poisoning. The case had exposed the deep cultural and personal tensions beneath the surface of Christridge, leaving scars that would never fully heal. In the end, it became a cautionary tale, a reminder of how hidden desires and cultural prejudices can lead to devastating murder.